an objective researcher to look into the Kinsey research as it stood.
The president of American University at the time was Dr. Richard Berenson, who was later exposed in a sex scandal involving a series of obscene phone calls in which Berenson claimed he had a 4-year-old girl that he kept as a sex slave down in his basement. The calls were eventually traced to his office at American University. Berenson was exposed as a pedophile.
And I spoke with a lawyer later, and it turned out, of course, he had pornography in his drawers. They cleaned out the office, got rid of the pornography, though they found out later, the lawyer did, that it had been there. And he quickly fled, ran to Johns Hopkins University, and entered there and stayed there for, I think it was 3 weeks, and got a clean bill of health from Johns Hopkins, saying
you
that...
mean like psychiatric treatment?
Yes. Yes, suddenly he was okay.
But political opposition came not only from American University, but also in Washington, D.C., over the analysis of Playboy, Penthouse, and Hustler. As a result, Dr. Reisman was forced to publish her report independently. The FBI and 7-Eleven took notice, as we mentioned earlier, and that's when the soft porn giants fought back. In her book, The Powerhouse, journalist Susan B. Trento documents how Playboy and Penthouse magazines hired a Washington-based PR firm named Gray & Company to create a media blitz that would discredit Dr. Reisman and the entire Reagan Commission on pornography. She writes that dealing with Judith Reisman was not difficult. Since Reisman was without political savvy and lacked allies, she made a most appealing target for discrediting. Trento says that Gray & Company charged between $50,000 and $75,000 per month for the campaign against Dr. Reisman, and that for this particular account, much of the cost was borne by Playboy. Penthouse also provided funding. Because of the controversy, it would be a decade later before Dr. Reisman's research would be officially embraced by the Department of Justice. In a letter written by past administrator Robert Sweet, he says, while the massive affluent sex industry has employed nearly every technique in their arsenal, short of violence, to stop Dr. Reisman's work, they have not shown her findings to be incorrect or methodologically flawed in even the smallest detail.
Why don't you care more about the children than you do about protecting the finances of the sex industry and the sex establishment?
Yes, Judah. Right, the sex industry. Tell me about this sex industry.
Dr. Reisman has for years argued against the harmful impact of the sex industry on America's children. Many of the PhDs who teach in our universities have not only been associated with the Journal of Pedophilia, but have also served as the board members for pornographic magazines like Penthouse Forum. These are the people who have designed the programs for sex education in America. Because Kinsey chose to define the pain and suffering of abused children as orgasm, he then argued that children were sexual from birth and should be taught about having sex as soon as possible. While most who promote the programs probably don't know it, this thinking is what lies behind the idea of teaching sex education to kindergartners.
I remember him using this in his campaign against me, saying Barack Obama supports teaching sex education to kindergartners. And, you know, which I didn't know what to tell him. But it's the right thing to do. You know, to provide age-appropriate sex education, science-based sex education, science-based sex education in the schools.
Remember that this science-based sex education begins with the so-called scientific data gathered by Kinsey's pedophiles and recorded by him in his sex reports. Something that Kinsey's followers continue to insist is relevant in teaching our children today.
These specific findings about these children are totally irrelevant to modern sex education.
Consider again this image of a teacher showing what appears to be 6- and 7-year-old girls how to use a condom. Who will this 7-year-old be using a condom with? When you consider that the PhDs who have designed these programs openly support the pedophile philosophy, we can only wonder, is sex education really intended to protect America's children, or to condition them for seduction at the hands of a child molester? Why are America's children disappearing? For those who study the influence of Alfred Kinsey, the answer becomes more than clear. The Kinsey Institute continues to lead the way in sex education and continues to be funded by the American taxpayer. Dr. Reisman believes the Institute should come under an official investigation, something she was prevented from doing during her time at the Department of Justice.
The Kinsey Institute was so frightened that the truth would come out. That time it was Reinisch, and then later it would be Bancroft, that they threatened lawsuits to everybody. And they pulled out every stop. They put the arm on everyone politically and institutionally. Their Rockefeller grants, their money, their funding from all kinds of other people would be pulled into play to stop Reisman from looking at the information that was right out there, that belongs in the hands of the American public, so that the American public can make their own decisions about whether this is true, whether I'm wrong and I should be sued or put in jail or something, fine. Or whether they're wrong and we need to have a proper investigation so that the American public knows